Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a situation that is right on a knife's edge, this massive U.S. military buildup right next to Iran. So, is this really the prelude to an all-out war, or is there something else going on entirely? Let's get into the sources.
Okay, let's just jump right in with this quote. Hours away from total war. Wow. I mean, that is a stunning, dramatic claim from the military show. It really paints a picture of a powder keg just waiting for a spark. So what on earth is driving this kind of alarming assessment?
Well, to really wrap your head around the scale here, the UK Defense Journal is calling this the largest American military buildup anywhere since the Gulf War. We're talking about a concentration of military force that we just haven't seen in decades.
All right, so what does a force of this size actually look like? Let's break down the incredible amount of hardware that's being moved into position right now.
So the backbone, the absolute core of this entire operation is just immense naval power. The U.S. hasn't sent one but two full aircraft carrier strike groups into the region. Each one of these is basically a floating city that brings its own air force with it. And it's definitely not just about what's on the water. Look at the sheer variety of air power being moved into striking distance. Of course, you've got the top-tier stealth fighters, the F-35s and the F-22s. But just as critical are all those support planes, the tankers for refueling, and the reconnaissance aircraft. That's the stuff that gives this force its incredible reach and, a kind of God's eye view of the entire battlefield. And this slide really gives you the full naval picture. You've got the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group already there, the USS Gerald R. Ford Group is on its way, and you've got additional destroyers moving in. When you put it all together, this isn't just a fleet. It's a floating fortress, and it's effectively creating a blockade with hundreds of aircraft ready to launch at a moment's notice. But here's where it gets really interesting. Even with all this hardware, everything you'd think you'd need for a so-called total war, there is one huge piece of the puzzle that is just conspicuously missing. So you have to ask the question, right? Why would the U.S. assemble one of the most powerful air and sea forces we've ever seen, but then not bring the corresponding land forces? What does the absence of boots on the ground really tell us about the strategy here? And we're not just speculating here. Military expert Preston Stewart highlights this exact point. He points out that unlike past conflicts like the War on Terror, that massive land invasion force, well, it's simply not there. And make no mistake, this isn't some accident or an oversight. It's a very deliberate choice. U.S. officials have gone on record again and again saying there is no interest in boots on the ground. They're framing any potential action as something that would target Iran's nuclear program specifically, not its people. So if a ground invasion is completely off the table, what is the purpose of this massive force? It starts to paint a very different picture, doesn't it? Maybe this isn't just about preparing for war. Maybe it's a very modern and very, very high-stakes form of what they used to call gunboat diplomacy, using overwhelming military might as leverage in these nuclear negotiations that are happening right now. The trouble is, those talks in Geneva seem to be producing two completely contradictory stories. On one side, you have the Iranian foreign minister claiming progress was made. But on the other, you have an expert like Preston Stewart who's basically interpreting that diplomatic language as code for no progress made. It just creates this deep uncertainty about whether a peaceful solution is even possible at this point. All of this uncertainty, this incredible military pressure, and these conflicting reports, it all comes down to one person making the final monumental decision, the U.S. president. And as you can see here, the arguments are just pulling in completely opposite directions. On one hand, you have proponents arguing that this is a unique moment to act, that the Iranian regime is weak and a strike could restore U.S. credibility. But on the other, you have opponents warning of a catastrophic miscalculation, a long, spiraling war that could destabilize the entire region for years to come. So, the board is set. All the military pieces are in place. But diplomacy, however shaky it might seem, is still on the table. As the entire world watches, the answer to this one question could end up changing the landscape of the Middle East for decades to come.